Workshop video log this week. I'm going to talk about a Triumph we got in here. It's TR6, but it's been made to look like the TT. TT being probably which would have been the bike that would have been in the States, because it's got exhaust pipes just cut off underneath here. So they're slashed underneath, and originally they wouldn't have had any baffles at all. The guy himself who owns this has put lights on, which probably the bike, when it was in the States, in this competition spec, wouldn't have had lights on. And he's had a tank, he's got a small tank for it painted up. He's got his own take on the back light. He's had the wheels rebuilt. The motor he didn't touch, the engine, so he had a trophy in here the other week. Sorry, a Tiger 650. And he said to me, could I have a look at this engine? Now, it was running, but only on one cylinder, and hadn't been touched, like I say. We noticed that the rocker box gaskets were leaking, and the typical thing on a Triumph, pushrod tubes. These have changed so many times, these push rods, and the sealing can be quite different, the type of seals that are fitted. So we had the tank off, we had the head off, and we found when we took the cylinder head off, we found one exhaust guide badly worn. So we replaced that valve guide on exhaust only. We've recut all the valves and they've been ground in. We took the barrels off because the bores were a little bit marked. They'd been laid up for some time, and it was just so easy to just take the barrels off and check to make sure what the rings were like. The rings are a bit worn, so we cleaned the pistons out, the carbon around the ring grooves. But what we did find in Triumph engines, now, and show you on here, there's some pictures as well. When you lift the barrel off, in the top part of a Triumph engine, you have two throat screws. And you have the exhaust camshaft on this side, obviously, and the inlet one there. Well, just on the inside where the barrel sits down, there's two little screws that hold the crankcase together. They can't come out in situ because the barrel where it sits down into the crankcase, it won't let it come out. The screw is missing on this side, so I had to make one up for it. It's quite easy to do. But so you never know what's inside when you come to take it apart, how much work will need to be done. Now this, I said to him, look, you know, as far as I know, I can't say, because you could take every job apart completely. The bottom end of the engine seems to be okay, so we just concentrated on the top end. Put it back together and run it back up on the concentric carb, but it's got a slight issue. I'll show you in a minute. We referenced carburetors before with a problem with the pilot jet getting blocked, and you put it in the sonic cleaner and it still won't clean. And the symptoms are when you start it up, you use the choke, take the choke off, it dies. The autopilot jet, you can't get any response, and it's because that seating is blocked. You can be lucky sometimes and free it up, but more times it pays to put new carb on. And if you put the later concentric carb on, you can take the seat out on the pilot jet. So that really is what we need for this now. I just got to do something with the handlebars. They're a bit flexy. They're on rubbers, but we need to do something about that. And we're going to change a forecoil. Can't fire it up today because we've got the carbon bits. We're just going to run it through the sonic cleaner one more time. But with a lot of these, just show you here, with a lot of these carbs, now don't know why, but concentrics tend to wear the slide more. I did polish this out, but they rattle in the actual carb body itself, slides, and you get a wear line here, and they get quite scored. And what I tend to always do when they come in is I polish these out with Solvo. But we're probably going to end up changing this carb because he spent a lot of time on this and a little bit of money, and I've obviously done the top end for him, so a new carb would be quite a good idea. He's had the tank painted, looks very nice. So that is that job. That's where that is today. Just outside the workshop, we're going to do that a little bit later on. We've got the Continental GT, the 250 Royal Enfield. That's finished. We've got here it's in for winter service work. We've got the Commando, which belongs to Nigel. He does look after his bikes, as you can see. His business is actually cleaning motorcycles. Now, I had this in here last winter, and he's done over 6,000 miles on this bike this year. It gets used. And to be honest with you, this just goes to show, and I'm terrible, I don't ride my bikes because I'm always doing other people's, but you can ride a bike all season and it can still look like this. It doesn't look like it's been used at all. But he's had all that fun, he's used it. Now what it's in for really is end of season, so we do all the fluids, but he's also mentioned about the isolastic, isolastic. He wants it changed to vernier type. Last year it was in here and we changed the boots on the isolastic. It seemed okay, but I can feel a little bit of movement, just a little bit on the back wheel. So it's a little bit twitchy. It's just a little bit of movement there. It's going to run through that. We're going to whip his clutch out. We're going to do a few mods there because sometimes they suffer with the oil coming from the gearbox into the primary chain case, and it causes the plates to stick a little bit. But just routine, set the carbs back up for him and just run through it. So that's that one, that's quite straightforward.
A few other bikes in the workshop since last time, Dave?
Yeah, there's been several bikes in the workshop since the last time. We did have, about a week ago, we had the Tiger 650, that's gone back. We also had a Rocket 3, BSA Rocket 3, which is the triple. Same as what we done for a guy had the T160 Triumph. It's the same engine, so it's a canted forward 750. Yeah, so the BSA Rocket 3 came in for basically carburation to be sorted out. So whip the carbs back off, alter the needle positions, adjusted the tappets for him, and we got it running nicely. So that's gone back. He's happy with that. This bike I've had in here for a few weeks, and you might have seen this already briefly. This is a Villicet, it's a KTS, it's 1937. Now this, by the customer, he bought this back in 2005. It was sold at an auction down in Bewley, Bonham's auction, and it had never run since the time he picked this bike up. Got some issues with it. It got a concentric carb on, which is the same as what we're working on at the moment. I had one of these carbs on. This is off the Triumph at the moment. But what I've managed to find for him is the pre-monoblock carburetor. That is the correct carb for that model of bike. So I said I'm quite happy to work a price out on that, and you can have this fitted on there. Now, this engine, the biggest problem I could see with this is when we got it running, it had the mag timing was way out. So we've set the mag up. They called this the Cami Villicet. Now, in 1936, this engine, I was told, was well known for racing because it's bevel drive. So it doesn't have push rods. It has it's driven by gear, and you have a shaft. I'll show you in a moment. It runs up to the bevel box, so it's overhead cam. So it's an advanced bike for its day. Now we've got to sort the engine out, and the rest of the bike looks pretty good. So I said to him, you know, I don't mind doing it because some of these jobs can take a long time, as you know, with the Scott. But what we have here, we've got the back mudguard. Now this section is metal, but this section is plastic. So someone's put reproduction tailpiece on here. It's important that we get this. We can pick one of these up, probably with the same profile, manufacture this and put the number plate back on, because the main stand, when it's off the stand, it retracts and it fits up onto here. Now at the moment, it's the only thing that braces this plastic bit of the mudguard. So we need to do that. I found him, like I say, the carburetor that should be on there. Now if we look at the engine on the bench, so we got the engine and gearbox out. Gearbox I haven't taken apart yet. We have a bearing issue with that. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the engine itself, now, as you can see, I've gone as far as stripping to here. We don't need to go any further with this. So talking about how this works. In here we have the crankshaft. We've got a bevel drive gear, and it takes the drive and it comes up where normally like a push rod tube would be.
Just show us the bevel, mate. Just angle the engine. That's it. Yeah, cool.
There you can see the bevel gears turning. And here we have the oil pump by the side. You notice the outlet here, this bevel drive box will fill up with oil from the pump, and the oil then is forced up through the centre of this bevel drive shaft assembly, through the tube. Now the drive itself is taken like this. This is on the inside of the tube. So this is how you get the drive to the top. But it's most important to get your timing right. Now I've marked everything, so when I come to put it back together, it will all line up. I've put a mark here. I know this has to be at TDC, and on my cylinder head, I have a mark here on the bevel gear here. So I will line those two lines up together at TDC, and that's when the valves will be on the rock. Now what we're going to do with this, we're just going to drop the valves out of this, just make sure the guides are okay. But the engine doesn't seem too bad. So we did have it running, and it did actually, it's pumping oil up here because this is regulated. You've got a regulator for the amount of oil that comes up to the top of the engine. Now this tube, when it was in situ, it sits over the top. Try and get it to go back up inside. I'll take it off anyway. Do it like this. That's the easiest way. There should be a sealing. They used to use like asbestos string in the past, but we can get round that. There's no sealing in here. But I've found out that the tube is quite badly damaged. So when this was running, oil was coming up inside here like it should, which goes up into the cam box at the top, bevel drive box, and then goes through to doing the rockers. And then it has like a wide piece that goes back down to the crankcase and then scavenged back to the tank. But here, this damage here was causing this tube, oil was leaking out of here, an enormous amount. So taking the engine down, we found the cylinder barrel. A few fins have been broken in the past, and I found some rings because the main rings on here are a little bit worn. Now this is obviously not original. It has been re-sleeved. What we mean here is when the bore, because this is cast iron, once it becomes badly worn, it can be relined with a liner. So that if you look here, you'll see that this has been set into this original casting here. So this is a liner that's been refitted. Now that measures up to 74 millimeter. So I can get a new set of rings and making sure that I get correct size, because this is wider oil control ring than most pistons. So I can get a set of rings for it. I've actually honed the barrel out, and if you look in there, it doesn't look too bad. See, for these old engines, these old bikes, it's very hard getting parts. So you are up against it. If you can't get it, you make it, or you have to repair what you've got. But I think really with having the fins done, new set of rings, repairing that tube, whipping the valves out, making sure the guides are okay, we should be there. So the bottom end seems very good. There's no play anywhere. The crank seems in good condition. This is all the cush drive from the other side.
How do you check the bottom end, mate?
The bottom end, it's just a case of turning the engine over. It doesn't feel lumpy. There's no movement on the conrod. There's no side to side. You can't feel any movement when you get hold of the crank on this side. You can't move it on this side. And just a visual inspection, I don't really want to take it right down any more than this, because there's no point in trying to struggle and getting off this bevel drive here. The bottom seems very good. So I think, you know, really, if we just concentrate on the top end. Now the gearbox does have a few issues. When I had it running, it was very noisy. We got where you can probably see it, but you can probably hear it. So we're going to whip the box apart, but it's very noisy running in neutral. So hopefully that won't be too bad to sort out. If it needs bushes, we're able to make them, and if it needs bearings, hopefully we can get some for it, and hopefully the gears aren't too badly worn. Some of the bushing here for the gear change is slightly worn, so we've got this end cover off, we'll heat this up, take this bush out, manufacture another bush here for it and put it back in. So that's going to be an interesting bike. And what is nice about this job, the owner is a lot younger. He's only in his early 40s and he's dead keen to get into British bikes. So far he's never ridden a British bike, so to have something like this and to have had it that long and not had the chance to ride it, so I'm quite happy to do it and get him out riding it. I think it'd be nice to see someone else, younger generation, interested in its older machinery. We talk a lot about the 60s and 70s bikes, but the 30s bikes, you know, they are harder to ride. So I said to him, you know, it might be easy if you have a ride out on something a bit more modern British bike first, but he'll be okay. We can teach him. It's getting used to, I mentioned about advance and retard and starting the bike, get it over the top of the compression and kicking it over. So that's that one. Now, briefly, I know we keep looking at the Scott, but the Scott at the moment, we are now stuck for one major component, magneto. If you look around this side, we've now got, I think you go around that side, we've now got the oil pump fitted back, and that dries off the crankshaft. We've made up the oil lines and they're now connected up to the crankcase. So this is a feed pipe. And here we have one pipe that will feed to the left-hand cylinder and one to the right-hand cylinder into the crankcase. So that's really as much as I can do at the moment. Carburetor, we're just having some spare cables made because it wants to have a whole new set of cables and spare cables. So they're being done at the moment. So that's all bolted back in place. The thing about this is you have to make sure that the pipes aren't near the chains. Everything runs quite close. The mag chain, when it's connected up, runs up here. So we have another pipe that comes off the oil tank to drip feed onto these two chains when it's in situ, when it's all up together. So it'd be nice to have this one, as everyone keeps saying, nice to see it running, but it will be, and it shouldn't be too far off now, hopefully. So that's what's going on in the workshop. Now outside, we got the Continental GT, right, Royal Enfield Continental GT 250. Now this one's about 1967. It came in here, you probably remember, just to get it up and running, recommission it. The tank, it has got the other tank. We had two tanks in here. This is the replacement tank because it had some damage here, it was leaking. We've relined this tank. We've fitted a new carburetor, a new concentric carburetor, because we have problems, the same as we have with the Triumph at the moment, not running properly, and it's all down to the fuel now and gumming up the pilot jet side of these carburetors. So, new carburetor, done the tappets, done the points, gear linkage. This was very floppy. We've rebushed this. This hasn't got the 5-speed cluster, it's got the 4-speed cluster gearbox. So we just run through the wiring. We've had the rev counter clock redone. It's actually almost like a brand new clock because that wasn't working, it was seized up. Put a new dip switch and horn on here. Just check the electrics, and that's it really, good clean up, and it's up and running now. But these were the bike that you could ride at 16, you know, and they were quick. They were well quick and very sporty. So I'm going to fire it up. So we just turn the key. The key on this, it can fall out. All it is it's just like a screwdriver blade. It's probably slightly worn, so we put a bit of bootlace around there. Turn that on, so if it falls out you can't go anywhere. Just tickle the carburettor, so tap on. It's only got the one tap. Tickle the carb on this side. Give it choke. Just put the footrest up. Starts pretty well, one kick. This always sounds a bit ticky, a bit like the Tiger Cub, because alloy engine, top end. Well, a pretty little bike. When it's warm it'll tick over nicely. So in the day when they had a 5-speed cluster gearbox, it was not uncommon to lose the 5th gear. And quite often, as a repair, they were put back to a 4-speed cluster. I think the 5th gear was more like an overdrive. This thing could run along at 70 miles an hour cruising. So quite a fast little bike. As I mentioned before, I had a C15, it was nothing like this. This was quite a sporty bike. You had your rear sets, your clip-ons, and we put the fly screen on here as well. So it makes it quite sporty looking. Right, still a bit cold. We'll just kick it back over for you. So Lana's popped in today with a Matchless, and it's a bit unfortunate because it's been really wet this last few weeks, and people know she's had the chance to ride this bike from AJS Matchless and give her opinion of the bike. So we've got 1 or 2 things we want to check on the bike for her today, but I want Lana to actually talk now to you and tell her experience of this bike and how she's got on with it. And I'm going to say, Lana, over to you. So first, just tell us how you're getting on first.
It's been a bit of a mixed experience of it. It's a really fun bike and I really like riding it. It does a really good swoopy round corners thing. I've had a few issues with it, namely this throttle unit span round while I was riding it and twisted backwards, came to a T-junction, and obviously you can't apply the brake because the cable was in the way. So that was a bit of an interesting clutch and back brake swoopy thingy slidey to the junction.
How did you fix it?
I fixed it with this insulation tape. So basically there's no return, automatic return on the cable, because it's also crimped it in being squashed by the lever. So got a nice bit of tape at the moment.
It's what we call a running repair.
Running repair.
So you got yourself out of trouble.
Yeah, so that was exciting.
So this is something we'll do today. We're going to put a new cable on for her, sort that out. And you've noticed that you've got a problem, a little bit of fuel dripping from the fuel tank?
Yeah, a little bit of a leak just above the fuel tap on this side. It's had a repair in the past, and it's just weeping a little bit. Not too badly. So that was good. So
what we'll do, we'll take the tank off, and we've got some like putty we can actually seal that up with, and it will go off and be okay so she can ride the bike home today. But your impression of riding a British bike against riding a Japanese bike, how did you find this compares riding with your friends with their modern bikes?
It doesn't ride that well with my normal group of friends. They're not very normal. Partly just because it's a completely different bike. It doesn't do the same speed. It doesn't start as quickly and doesn't indicate. So it's good fun, and they're kind enough to take it into consideration and go a bit more steadily with it. I kind of feel that it's a more of a, what do I feel? It's more of a going to a bike night bike and chatting about it in the car parks, or it needs a group of people who all have similar bikes to make it a fun ride out, and possibly not as long distances as I sometimes do. It's a different bike for a different thing. It's really comfortable, nice ride,
I think in the day, these were a bike that you used to go to work on. They didn't set anything alight, but it would be an everyday work bike, and the traffic speeds were different then, obviously. But with modern bikes, I've found, and we all know, that you're better off riding with people that got old bikes. You seem to ride in a different way, slower speeds, and take things a bit slower, and everything's different. Gear changing is slower. But I think it's great for you to have the experience of riding a British bike. But it's so unfortunate it's time of year, you've got all this rain, and you've actually experienced coming through floods. So how do you get on with that?
It actually handles really well in the wet. It's got really nice mud guard, so it keeps dry, apart from when I had to ride through a flood and I've got wet feet. Yeah, it's a nice weight and solid, so it doesn't slide around like my newer bikes. They're still 30 years old, but newer bikes do. So that it doesn't feel dangerous riding it.
No,
it's just obviously got no fairing, no umbrella.
So how do you find starting the bike? Like, because you're probably used to kickstarts. I mean, I know you got a variation of bikes, but this is a bit more basic, isn't it? It's turn on the fuel, tickle the carburetor. So how do you enjoy that experience doing that, or is it something that you find a chore against pressing the button and turning the key?
I like both of them. I like both. I mean, they're different. They're different things. They're different machines. Yeah, sometimes it starts easier than others, and it's a lot easier to start without having winter motorbike gear on, because it gets really hot if it doesn't start first time. Then you just end up getting really hot. Yeah, it's good.
So today we're sorting you out,
easy.
And we'll get you going today. So we're hoping that you're going to have some dry days to actually experience riding this. And I think you've mentioned that this is great on sort of B roads, really, more than a road bike. It's great for just poodling around the lanes. In fact,
it's really fun in the lanes. Yeah. And just taking it easy, looking around, just enjoying the bike and the ride rather than trying to get to a destination is part of it, I suppose.
Do you find people will approach you because you're riding this bike, or is there interest from the public because it's an older bike being used by yourself? Do they come and chat to you about it and then intrigue what you feel about it and why you ride it? Yeah,
there's a lot of interest in the bike just for itself, and then there is some surprise and interest in how I managed to ride it, I suppose. There's been some older women I've met who say, I used to go on the back, or I rode a bike, but I always had to get my partner to start it for me and things. So it's quite interesting that people feel that they can't ride it.
This is what's really nice, the fact that you now are riding this machinery. It will put a lot of other people, a lot of other women, younger riders that feel, actually I want to do this. I actually see what you're doing, experience riding. It's for someone that doesn't want to go 100 miles an hour, isn't it? It's just enjoying the ride, and it can be a lot of fun if a few of you got the older bikes. You're not in a hurry, are you?
And it would still make a good commuter bike, is the thing.
Yeah, it would,
because it's pretty reliable, apart from this and this and this. But apart from that, it's reliable.
It hasn't missed a beat, has it?
No, it runs really well.
It's really good.
It just needs a little bit of tinkering with, to like you say, running repairs or keeping an eye on it. But yeah, it's solid, it's comfortable. You could easily, ride 5 miles and back again each day, and it'd be a good bike for doing that. Probably more so than some of the new bikes, which are hunched over in a funny position and things.
Something I want to touch on is the fact that these old bikes are old, but they're very simple. And I think that's something where a lot of people probably think, an old bike's going to let me down. It doesn't need to let you down. Okay, we've got a couple of issues here, but straightforward things to put right. It's just a cable. Okay, we've got a slight weep on the tank, but we're looking at a bike is 1950s, so it's the best part of 65 years old. So don't be put off by an older bike. They can be reliable and they are easy to repair. You've found that.
You can see what the problem is just because there's nothing cluttering it up. You can get to it, do something easy, and it goes again.
Because you're a hands-on person anyway, and if you had to work on this bike, it's something you could do in your own time quite easily. So that's another bonus with these older bikes. They can be repaired quite straightforward. So Lana, we want to chat about your likes and dislikes. Your likes first on this bike, or have they changed? Well,
my favourite bit is actually swooping around corners. It does that really well.
So it handles well.
It handles really well.
That's
I like
good
that.
to know.
Yeah, that's good. I did really like this magneto button that turns it off until I had this issue with the throttle, and the clutch was going a bit funny because it was rainy and it wasn't travelling properly, and basically because the throttle wasn't returning, it got stuck on full revs while I was going along the road, and the clutch wouldn't do its thing, so I couldn't get it into neutral. So I had to pull over at the side of the road, bearing in mind it's got no indicators or hazard flashers, and try and turn the bike off using the wrong hand with the button.
We are revving at
We're
this
revving
moment.
at full revs. And
it's still
yeah.
one piece.
Yeah, because of my quick thinking and interesting trying to do this.
It's the only bike really matchless, I think, that actually puts one on the magneto. That is an issue, really.
Yeah.
But a lot of people do actually put a wire from that assembly down
I
here.
can see why.
They will put a wire from here. They will modify this and put a wire up underneath the tank, up to a button switch on the top. In fact, the other matchless bikes we've had here have had that. I think one of them did anyway. But so the handling's good. So do you find we've got these new tyres on here? We've got these road riders. Do you find good feedback with those?
Yeah,
on this
I like
bike?
them. Yeah.
So it's a good tyre for an old bike.
Yeah, I think it's only done a little bit of a slip once on probably a drain cover or something like that. And
Which is
other than
slippery
that,
anyway,
it's got a better road grip and road
Lighting.
handling. Some of them.
6 volt. So how do you get on with riding in the dark, or have you not had to ride?
Bit rubbish, but
It's a bit like a candle.
it's
in
a bit
jar,
like a
isn't it,
candle,
really?
yeah. But it's okay. I probably haven't done roads that I don't know anyway, so I kind of know where.
And the other thing is, no indicators. So how do you get on with doing hand signals? Probably you don't mind?
I don't mind. Yeah, you just have to make sure that you think about it before you get to the junction, and make sure you can indicate, let people know where you're going, and then get your hands back on the controls.
So summing up, the best features of this. Now you've captured a few things here. What do you really like? What stands out that you like about this?
I like that it's very solid, very basic, and handles really nicely riding along. It is good fun doing that. I don't have particular dislikes about it, really. I think I just generally like it for what it is.
For an old bike like this, that's pretty good, really, isn't it? And it does start okay for you, doesn't it, most of the time?
Yeah. There was one day when it wasn't starting that well, and basically it was my fault for it being stood on gravel. So when I was kicking it, it didn't have the same
you couldn't get
power travelling through because it was just sinking. So I just moved over onto some harder standing, and then it was fine. And then I felt a bit stupid for not just doing that in the first place.
It's a learning curve. It's a different machine. I think that's really good. I think, what we're getting back from you is good feedback, and it's going to help a lot of people. Don't be put off by something like this, because give it a go.
One thing that's really surprising is it's got a really strong back brake.
That's
really,
good.
really solid. Yeah, really good.
And find the front brake?
The front brake's good too.
So
the back brake, I had to rely on when it didn't want to stop on the front brake, so that's how I know the back brake's so good.
So you're actually quite happy with brakes on the bike?
Yeah. Surprisingly, it was...
always been this myth,
stop.
Brakes don't work particularly well, but there you go, they do. And you found, how did you find, because we mentioned about it's not particularly fast bikes, so where did you find it fitted in on cruising? Where's the sort of speed that it felt comfortable?
Probably 45, 50.
Yeah.
It doesn't really want to do more than that. I possibly went slightly more, I don't know, one point down a hill or something, but other than that, it's quite
there's something that I haven't mentioned to you, but you'll say now, did you find it quite torquey? Do you find it hangs onto its gears nicely?
Yeah.
Which is great, isn't
really
it?
Good. Yeah.
And I think this is the thing, and smoothness of the engine too. Find it pretty smooth.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
This is where this engine was always an improvement in a way on a lot of the earlier stuff, because you got that third bearing crankshaft in that engine. It runs really smooth. Although we know we've had issues with these in the past, but they are a well put together engine and very easy to work on. So that's good to know. And you had an issue with the throttle, and that thing was running quite quick for a while.
It was.
It didn't suffer. No, it's fine. And it's all tight. It's not leaking oil. I think we lose a little bit from the gearbox
Yeah.
or primary chain case, but looking at the rocker box, the cylinder head around the barrels, it's dry, and I think that's good for a bike of that age. So I think it's holding up pretty well, really. So I think we covered it. I think really.
Yeah, that's good.
Thank you.